Hello, people of the internet, and welcome to another episode of Kaiju's Corner. I am your host, Andres Perez, Kaiju Noir, and here's the third and final installment of our retrospective look through the history of Heisei Godzilla, named after, of course, the Heisei era of Japan, which lasted from January 8th, 1989, all the way to April 30th, 2019, which pretty much corresponds with the reign of Emperor Akihito up until his eventual retirement, where his son took over as the new emperor of the Reiwa era. So with me and my good old buddy here, Patrick Galvan, we are here to talk about every single Godzilla film made between the years of January 1989 and April 2019. In the last couple of parts, we talked about the Godzilla films of the 80s and 90s, what Japan likes to call the Versus era, as opposed to us Americans, we call it as the Heisei era. In the second episode, we talked about what we call the Millennium era, what Japan calls the X era of Godzilla films, ranging from Godzilla 2000 all the way to Godzilla Final Wars, with a special nod, of course, to Godzilla 98. And so for this final installment, we are going to talk about what I like to call the modern age of Godzilla. Although what's really funny is that if you look at the Wikipedia article, you'll see that all these movies that we are talking about, somebody labeled them the Reiwa period of Godzilla movies, lasting from 2016 to the present day.
Really?
Yes, if you go to the Wikipedia article right now, you'll have Heisei period 84 to 95, which, as I mentioned, is technically not really all correct. You have the Millennium period from 99 to 2004. Okay, that sounds good. Reiwa period 2016 to present. I'm like, hold the phone there.
Is it just the Godzilla Wikipedia page in general?
The Godzilla parentheses franchise Wikipedia page.
Okay, let's look that up.
Yeah, so someone clearly messed up here, and it's like, sure, us fans, we get to decide, we have our own interpretations as to what counts as a particular movie or not. Of course, all these Godzilla movies up until April 30th of this year, what counts as Heisei, but the fans don't see it that way. They often use that label for specifically the 80s and 90s, even though technically Godzilla 84 is technically still a Showa movie. But fans like to group up these movies into convenient chunks for them to easily categorize. And much like how we like to use the words anime and manga to talk about specific things that we enjoy, people like to use stuff like Showa, Heisei, Millennium, Reiwa to make it sound cooler than it actually is. And you know what, in any case, Japan does the exact same thing with the English language. So, you know, they take the English words and probably misuse them a lot, mispronounce them a lot to fit whatever definition they'd like.
And I just looked it up, the Godzilla franchise Wikipedia page. Yep, Reiwa era from 2016 to present.
Yep, even though right now, as of now, there has technically been no Reiwa era Godzilla movie.
Yeah.
With the exception of Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, which, as of this recording, will be coming out this Friday. And, you know, that's exactly...
You mean Godzilla King of the Monsters?
Yes, King of the Monsters. What did I say?
You said Planet of the Monsters.
Damn it! I was looking at the Wikipedia page when that happened.
Anime Part 1.
Yes. Alrighty then. So, previously we talked about the Millennium Era and how by the time Final Wars ends, there was this long 10-year period of no new Godzilla movies. All we ever got were, you know, some games, several comic books, maybe a lot of fan projects, and as the years went by, you know, the internet became more widely available than ever. YouTube became a thing. The Godzilla community grew bigger and bigger. We moved beyond simple forums. We moved into social media. Obviously, you know, the whole entire Godzilla YouTuber community became a thing. And so for the longest time, we as Godzilla fans, at least here in the West, mainly revolved our fandom over these roughly 28, 29 movies. And that's all that ever, like I mentioned before, that's all that ever was, and that's all we thought that there ever will be. And it's very strange now we've entered like this modern age of Godzilla movies where these are movies that we are watching as they come out. Whereas like I would probably say, like, for most of us who watch these movies, we watch them, like, well after the fact. We watch them, I guess technically Godzilla Final Wars was a new movie that was out, but the majority of us never really saw it until after it was all said and done, and it was put on DVD thanks to Sony Pictures and TriStar. So yeah, with the herald of the modern age, that we were able to watch the progression of the development of these movies, see the whole process from the very first teaser trailers all the way to the final product, and maybe even then see like whatever special features gives us a bigger insight into the production of these movies. Thanks to the internet, we now have like a lot of information right at our fingertips the moment it comes out. So this era of Godzilla feels significantly different from the eras in which we grew up with, during at least for people like you and me who are like in our late 20s, growing up in like the 90s and the 2000s. It was like, the 2010s gave us a much different experience than what the previous 2 decades gave us.
Yeah, Godzilla's a lot more, for lack of a better word, accessible these days, and immediately accessible than he was, in our youth.
Absolutely, man. And so, for a while, we didn't think that there was going to be any new Godzillas until in roughly around 2010, 2011, there were rumors about that maybe Hollywood was going to go forward with a brand new Godzilla. The only news we ever had for the longest time, I remember, was the fact that Yoshimitsu Banno, the director of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, signed on as, I believe, an executive producer for Godzilla 2014, for what would become Godzilla 2014. Initially, I believe he pitched was it a 90-minute or like a 30 minutes? I forgot how long that movie was, but he pitched a short film titled Godzilla 3D to the Max for a 2009 release date, focusing on a father and son duo, a father who was still dealing with the post-traumatic stress that he experienced during 9/11, and he and his son go through his young son, I assume, presumably go through a lot of struggle as Godzilla fights a new monster that's somewhat inspired by Hedorah called Deathla, as their fight goes from Mexico all the way to Las Vegas. Las Vegas being the kind of the centerpiece of that promotional poster. Although I don't know exactly where that poster came from. It just sort of mysteriously popped up out of nowhere. And we all looked at Godzilla 3D to the Max, and we were waiting for its release in 2009, came and went. And it was around 2010, 2011, we heard we heard the rumors that this project was eventually going to evolve into a full-on Hollywood blockbuster that eventually came to pass. What was your thoughts? What was your thought process or your thinking, looking back on the 3D to the Max or the 3D to the Max deal?
Well, at the time, I was just a high school student, and my only real thought at the time, and I didn't really follow like kaiju news at that age. I was just mostly just waiting for the films because I really wanted a film to make up for Final Wars for me. So I was hoping Toho would at least make one more film that it would redeem Godzilla in my eyes, from my perspective, from what we got in 2004. But I didn't really follow the news. So all I knew was that the the Godzilla 3D to the Max just never came to be, and it wasn't until Godzilla 20. It wasn't until 2010 where the news came out that Legendary had was moving forward with a feature-length American Godzilla film. Where it was also kind of like a two-part piece of excitement for me, in that it was hey, it's a new Godzilla film, and it's also an opportunity for Hollywood to make up for its first attempt at adapting Godzilla for their first feature-length film based on Godzilla. As for the background of the thing, Yoshimitsu Banno had acquired. After Final Wars, Banno acquired the rights to make a short IMAX feature that was going to be produced by his company, Advanced Audiovisual Productions. Banno had a background in developing like IMAX equipment and making and his company usually like sought out investors to make IMAX shorts.
Oh wow, okay.
And that's the kind of thing that that's the kind of thing that he wanted to do with this. He could make his agreement with Toho said he could make the film if he could find the investors to fund it, because Toho was not going to finance it themselves.
Right, because at this point, Toho's not in the business of making movies anymore.
Certainly not Godzilla, that's for sure.
No. It's for Toho's like, you're dead to me, Godzilla.
Pretty much. After the dismal box office of the Millennium films, it pretty much was. Anyways, long story short, that project never got off the ground. You had producers who backed out. You had things that never, and it just never got off the ground. However, eventually it was at some point along the way, Bono and I think it was his then producer, went to Toho to renegotiate the deal that would permit a feature-length project. And even though that producer backed out, somebody else came in and brought the idea to Legendary Pictures, and that's what led to Godzilla, what eventually became Godzilla 2014. And because it was his brainchild, Yoshimitsu Banno getting credit as executive producer.
Right. And this will go off on a small tangent here, but I remember afterwards Bono stated that he still wanted to do something related to his original plan to make a pseudo sequel to Hedorah, and that I think later on he said I believe he was looking for investors in making a sort of Gamera 3D IMAX movie where it was like Gamera versus a creature that was sort of Deathla but not really. I believe it was called Gyra. And it was a creature that looked like a big red tentacled walrus thing that eventually grew into this humanoid skull-faced monstrosity. All that exists of this movie is just concept art of the monsters, which I believe Inshomo was able to get his hands on it. And unfortunately, nothing ever came of that. So I can only presume that there were no investors who wanted to back up Gamera. So unfortunately for poor Anno, he never got to make the project of his dream with him at the helm. But given what happened in the aftermath of Godzilla 2014, I would say that, despite him never being able to make his dream project, I think he was able to, I find it rather kind of romantically, how would you call it? Like romantically, appreciative that by sacrificing his dream of helming a Godzilla film, he was able to usher in a new era for Godzilla.
Yeah, you could say it's like very bittersweet.
Yeah, that would be much better than whatever the hell I was thinking of. Yeah, very bittersweet that, that some things didn't turn out the way he wanted, but in a big resurgence of Godzilla came about due to his actions. And for the longest time, I remember we waited for this movie to come out. For a while, we thought it was going to be in 2012, when that clearly wasn't going to be happen. There was the Comic-Con trailer, which eventually leaked online. But before then, all we had were just little descriptions of what was going to happen. Everyone was making their own fan-made concept art of what Godzilla was going to be like. For the longest time, people were taking statues and maquettes thinking that they were the real deal, and they were making fan art based off of that. It was so much speculation. The Godzilla community, I'd never seen the Godzilla community be in such a frenzy trying to dig up any information they could out of this movie. And of course, friendships were forged during this time. Between people online. I feel like it helped grew the Godzilla community, brought them closer than ever before. And it's funny how, looking back on it, a lot of people, including myself, were sort of holding up the Godzilla 2014 as the be all end all of Godzilla, where it's we're confident that Hollywood knew exactly what to do with Godzilla in the aftermath of Godzilla 98. And of course, it's really silly to assume that they would make the quote unquote perfect Godzilla movie, because of course everybody has their own interpretation of Godzilla, and it's a Hollywood movie. Hollywood is not perfect by far. They're bound to screw up and make mistakes. Even some of their best movies, where there's always some things that could be improved. And so Godzilla 2014 came. I know everyone was. I remember there was so. That's the thing. Starting with Godzilla 2014, there's always a huge debate. There's always huge arguments between fans as to whether or not this Godzilla movie or that Godzilla movie was good or bad. And I find it very interesting because with the previous 29 Godzilla movies, there was enough time had passed to where people were able to sort of have a common consensus on most of these movies. You know, it's like movies like Godzilla 1954, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monsters, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. These are what are considered good, like, S-tier Godzilla movies. Godzilla's Revenge, Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, Godzilla vs. Megalon. These are considered bad Godzilla movies. So it's like most of us, I feel like, we're in agreement as to what were good and what were bad. But with the release of these newer Godzilla movies, every time there's always a debate between this movie sucks, this movie's awesome, you're stupid, no, you're stupid.
Anders, are you quoting an actual Facebook conversation? Because that sounds stunningly accurate.
You don't like it because it's different.
That I know came from somebody verbatim.
You're not a real fan if you don't like this.
If you dislike this movie, you must automatically dislike that one too.
And you know what? It is. I don't mean to. I really don't want to be preachy here, but it just goes to show that, you know, everything is 100% subjective, in that differences of opinions are always going to happen. Mm-hmm. And this should be common sense by now, but no, people want to prove that their opinion is the right opinion. Mm-hmm. And if anything, the modern age of Godzilla movies have shown us it is exactly that.
Yeah.
That mentality. But yeah, with Godzilla 2014, what was your reaction to it at the time, and how do you view the movie now?
Well, first of all, to give my antecedents, I was actually I was one of those weirdos who was not, expecting it to be the end all be all Godzilla film.
What the fuck?
I was hopeful. Since I knew from like advanced material that they were not doing a Roland Emmerich type thing of completely reimagining Godzilla to the point where it wasn't even Godzilla anymore. Mm-hmm. I went in knowing that, and I was just hopeful that, I was hoping that it would at least be good and enjoyable. I was not expecting, the next 54. And unlike a lot of people, I am told, I did not obsessively watch and analyze every single trailer that came out. In fact, I still don't do that kind of thing today either.
Right, especially when the Godzilla 2014 straight up lied to us as to what this movie was really about. Yeah,
I did see the one trailer where it was like, where they were quoting Oppenheimer and making it seem like, it was going to be Godzilla, versus mankind kind of thing, which is not at all what the
no. was. It's so crazy to think that in hindsight that we were all expecting Godzilla versus mankind when he ended up was 70s era superhero Godzilla. Two monsters show up out of nowhere, and Godzilla has to show up himself to take care of business.
Yeah, it's or you could also say kind of like, since the film is not as campy as the 70s films, you can say it's kind of like, like a Heisei Gamera as Godzilla, sort of.
Yeah, totally. It ends the exact same way as Guardians of the Universe. I almost said Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Universe.
Also a good movie.
Yeah, oh yeah. You always, when Godzilla enters the scene, enters the sea, you almost expect da 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 da.
As for my first reaction to the film, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good picture, but I was not falling over myself, salivating over it, because even for that first viewing, I thought there was a lot of things about the film that were lacking. I thought the script was kind of flimsy. I thought the characters, for the most part, were not especially engaging. I thought the dialogue was beyond bad, which I still think to this day.
You're lying.
You're
hiding something.
I love Bryan Cranston as much as the next person, but there were some lines in that film even he couldn't say, like something started talking, and I mean talking. Like what? It's like it sounds like the actors are like having a hard time just saying their lines, let alone delivering with conviction.
You know what? I would probably have that sort of that same reaction Bryan Cranston had whenever some annoying person is in the comments of a video. It's like, I was having a good time, but then someone started talking, just talking, asking me if I had seen the Meg.
All right. Or Creepshow,
or Inhuman.
But still, all the same, I thought the film was visually very extraordinary. I thought it was enjoyable, and when the monsters were on screen, it was very satisfying. And when I walked out of the theater, I was like, hey, you know what? It wasn't great. Could have been a lot better, but it was satisfying. It got the job done. And so on that level, I was very happy with it.
For me, I was pretty much going through what a lot of Star Wars fans went through with The Phantom Menace, where it's like I was blindingly trying to praise it and defend it from any sort of critique. So it's like, no, you're wrong. It's a great movie. There's nothing wrong with the script. The characters were written to be realistic. It's still real to me, damn it. Of course, time had passed. I'd calmed down my fanboyisms. And I later accepted that, yeah, it's far from perfect. I still enjoy the movie. I still think there's a lot of wonderfully executed elements in the movie, like the cinematography, the music, the scenery, the moody atmosphere. In fact, to this day, I still consider it sort of like it has a bit of like a Spielbergian Raiders of the Lost Ark sort of vibe with it at certain points of the movie. A lot of like mystery, mystique to a lot of things. But yeah, the characters themselves were severely underwritten. No matter how, sure, maybe there are definitely people like Joe Brody who are in the army and who have gained a rather stoic sort of persona through their ordeals. But while it is real, it may or may not be realistic. It's not particularly engaging to have a non-emotive character unless you were to have characters around your stoic character to make up for that. Examples that come straight to mind would be like part 3 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where you have a lot of more colorful characters surrounding the stoic protagonist that is Jotaro. Another example would be Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. Mikazuki is another stoic, not so expressive character surrounded by more expressive characters, and seeing that sort of balance there. With Joe Brody, he's mostly by himself for the most part. He had something going with his strained relationship with his father, Bryan Cranston, who nailed it out of the park with this role, despite the dialogue we previously mentioned. He brought his A game there, but once he's out of the picture, the movie feels like it's dragging. It's the second act really that really brings this movie down. But by the end of the movie, I still feel like it was able to wrap things up pretty well for the most part, and got me interested in this new series of Godzilla movies. And yeah, I feel like it did more good than bad, but it still leaves a lot to be desired. But overall, I still think, while I no longer think it's a great movie, as I did in 2014, I still believe that it is a good movie, a solid movie overall, definitely worth checking out. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, yeah, it definitely paved the way for this new era of Godzilla media. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Is there anything in one thing I want to bring up was I found it very interesting how Gareth Edwards was chosen to work on this production, having only really worked on one major movie, which was Monsters, which was a movie that I wasn't really all that thrilled about. And I found it very interesting that he was plucked out of the indie scene, given a giant tentpole blockbuster movie, and then quickly went on to another tentpole blockbuster movie with Rogue One, only to have him just disappear off the face of Hollywood. Yeah. Pretty much, I feel like he mentioned that he wanted to go back to a more indie scene, maybe going back to working on special effects. So I feel like it's perhaps getting an indie director and throwing him into this gigantic Hollywood scene I can only theorize that it was too much for the guy, and it was like a bit like a lot happening too much too fast for him. And it's something we're also seeing with a lot of these, like, now what we now call the MonsterVerse productions, with Michael Dougherty directing Godzilla King of the Monsters. We have what was his name, Adam Wingard working on Godzilla vs. Kong. Kong Skull Island itself also featured indie director, what was his name, Jordan
Vogt Roberts. Yeah.
Yes. All these are like indie people who worked on like 1 or 2 movies before being given these big movies. And it's a strategy I've seen Hollywood do a lot, where they're taking these indie directors and putting them in these big scenes. And I feel like this is more of like a power grab for Hollywood studios, where it's like, I feel like a director from an indie scene would perhaps be more easy to manipulate and control, and easily turn them into Hollywood yes men, as opposed to, say, Steven Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino, where they have a lot more clout around them and a lot more power for them to make the decisions and make the movies they want to make. You know what I mean?
Yeah. These are corporate films more than anything else. The directors are basically like a hired guns, and the fact that they are fans of like the genre is more of a PR move than anything else. I mean, if Legendary said, "Hey, guess what, Michael Dougherty, we're going to make Godzilla like the '98 film tomorrow," he has no say in the matter.
Right. And all he can really do is schmooze with the fans and say, "Hey guys, I like Godzilla too, just like you." My favorite.
Or he could drop in the project and leave, but that's about as far as his authority would go.
Right. But I feel like with Godzilla being, and King Kong Godzilla being such niche properties, I get the feeling that there's less pressure from Warner Brothers and Legendary. There's less pressure on the directors from these big studios, as opposed to, like, say, Disney with Star Wars, where Star Wars and Marvel, those are like more of like, we cannot allow you to fuck this up for us because we have too much riding on the line here. Whereas with Godzilla, it's like, because it's more of a niche property, I feel like they're given more freedom to do what they want to do with these characters. What do you think about that?
You mean like the directors or like the studios?
I guess the directors, in terms of having more to do with these movies than say people working on a Marvel or Star Wars film.
Well, I think it's really hard to speculate offhand, but I think that it's really mostly that they're basically, as I said, hired guns, and they're just basically making the films to the best of their abilities. But the really big decisions have already been made for them. Like like Michael Dougherty, it was not Michael Dougherty's decision to put King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra into Godzilla King of the Monsters. Those were acquired by the studios long before he was even attached to make that film.
True. And I'm sure, like, the script of having a pseudo-Vietnam era King Kong film, that script was probably made long before Jordan Vogt Roberts was brought on to direct the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then. And so with the release of Godzilla 2014, obviously Godzilla was back in the spotlight, and there was already they were announcing a sequel because, of course, in the modern age of Hollywood, everything has to be franchised out because having sequels guarantees returning audiences. And there wasn't a confirmation of a cinematic universe yet, but we were all speculating. And eventually, King Kong got roped into things. But before King Kong Skull Island became a thing, we had a surprise from good old Japan, from good old Toho, where after like years of not touching Godzilla, with them handing Godzilla over to Hollywood, we had assumed that they were going to let Hollywood take the reins and take over the franchise from here on out. But no, in fact, Japan did the exact opposite, in that they wanted to make their own Godzilla movies, most likely to capitalize on the success of Godzilla. And so merely 2 years after Godzilla came out, Godzilla 2014 came out, we got Shin Godzilla, which was directed by two fan-favorite individuals among the Godzilla and anime fan bases, Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. Shinji Higuchi being the special effects director behind the Gamera series and was the director of the recent Attack on Titan movies. Hideaki Anno being someone who previously worked on a bunch of anime projects, such as Gunbuster, but was most popular for the creation of Evangelion. So it's almost like a match made in heaven for some people to see these two individuals who were friends and who have worked on movies together in the past, ever since they were a couple of young dudes in their 20s, coming together to work on a big project. Now, before going into Shin Godzilla and these two individuals, did you ever get the vibe that Toho was perhaps jealous of Hollywood Godzilla, and perhaps their pride got in the way and let their pride take control of them and say, hey, it's our character, we should be able to do just as good, if not better?
Well, I think it's been this is another case. It's kind of like a recurring thing throughout this retrospective we've been doing.
Uh-huh.
It's a matter of looking at what Toho has said, and it's something we'll delve into big time with the anime trilogy. It's a big case of looking at what Toho says through PR and looking at the greater context and seeing what it might have actually really been.
Uh-huh.
First of all, Hideaki Anno was first asked to make a Godzilla film back in 2013.
Oh, really? Okay.
He turned it down at first because he was still in the aftermath of the third Evangelion film, and he was in one of his big depression bouts.
Right.
And at the time of Shin Godzilla's release, the producer of the film, I forget his name, said that they had been wanting to make this film for a while, and that it was not merely to come out of the aftermath of the 2014 film. Mm-hmm. However, if you ask me, again, we're talking about the fact that remember Godzilla 98. We can backhand and badmouth it all we want, but Toho made a lot of money from that film.
Oh yeah, a
lot of money. Hilariously enough, again, as we mentioned before, they made more money off 98, and 98 sold more tickets in Japan than any of the Millennium Godzilla films.
And we should mention, I think you brought this up to me, that Godzilla 2014 wasn't as promoted in Japan as 98 was. In fact, all of my adult students that I've talked to aren't even aware that 2014 Godzilla is even a thing. They think that the 2019 Godzilla that they started noticing, maybe because of me, it's like, oh, hey, it's that thing that my teacher's obsessed about. They think that's the first Hollywood Godzilla movie in a while.
From what I understand, I believe Godzilla 2014 sold about 2 million tickets in Japan, which is about as much as Godzilla 2000 did, and about half as much as Godzilla 98 did. Looking at the statistics, with a ticket, ticket sales is the big way to determine, how popular a film was upon release, because if you just look at grosses, you have to factor in things like ticket prices, movie theaters, how many theaters there are, et cetera and so forth. But if you count the number of tickets sold, how many people went to go see the film, that's going to tell you whether or not things really got noticed. And again, only about half as many people went to see 2014 in Japan as they did for the 98 film, almost 20 years earlier.
Now, was that more than what Final Wars did?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Final Wars sold about 1 million tickets.
Okay. And I just know in the bigger picture, Godzilla costed $160 million, which isn't all that, which is about an average price for a big summer blockbuster movie, and it went on to gross nearly $530 million. So it was easily a success worldwide because, hey, surprise, surprise, the world still loves Godzilla. While in Japan, it's it's still going through a heavy lull period. But
actually, also to answer part two of your question, even though Toho has insisted in a lot of PR statements that they wanted to make this film, it was like years in the making.
Uh-huh.
I do think, again, consider the fact that Legendary had greenlit their film back in 2010.
Yeah.
Do you really think it's a coincidence that they decided to move forward with their own Godzilla, knowing for a fact that there'd be a Hollywood film coming out within a certain amount of years?
Right. Do you think it's possible? Do you think this was made out of jealousy or just pure like capitalism, just to like purely to make money?
I think it's a little bit of both. Because don't forget, there were those infamous statements like, "We're not going to bow down to Hollywood."
Yeah, I remember
being announced at the time. It's kind of like Godzilla 98. Toho openly supported 98 when it was like in theaters making money, saying that they were happy with it. Uh-huh. And then as soon as it's over, it's like, that was too synthetic. That's not the real Godzilla. We got to show them how it's really done.
Right. So this is a case of history repeating itself.
Very much so. But yeah, I think it's mostly just the fact that they wanted to. Of course, they knew that Hollywood films get international distribution. It's a big product that has their name on it, so. I think it was very clearly, it's very, the idea of capitalizing upon the Godzilla name when a big budget Hollywood product would be coming, to Japanese theaters. I think there was a bit. I think the economics behind it was also a big factor, especially after the dismal box office in general that the Millennium Godzilla films did.
Right. Now, I believe, Godzilla wasn't as heavily promoted as Godzilla 98, and the results show. Do you think it's possible that Toho intentionally screwed up on this is like super conspiracy theory now, and maybe it doesn't make sense for them to lose money in the process, but do you think it's possible that they toned down the marketing for Godzilla 2014 in Japan solely so they can capitalize on their Godzilla movie a couple of years later?
I think it's more likely they just screwed up.
Okay. Because it seems like history is repeating all over again, where it's like, I believe Toho put more energy into promoting Dumbo a couple months back, last month, than doing anything for Godzilla. And even though you do see some cool stuff in Japan related to Godzilla King of the Monsters marketing, outside of the movie theaters, there's not a whole lot of marketing pushed outside of that. The most marketing I saw outside of the movie theater was within the mall of the movie theater, and that's just normal of any movie being released in Japan. In fact, whenever a Japanese movie, like say a One Piece movie, a Detective Conan movie, a Dragon Ball movie comes out, a Doraemon movie, that shit is everywhere, man. You go to supermarkets, you go to convenience stores, you go to electronics stores, there is marketing out the wazoo, man. But for Godzilla, nothing really, especially in terms of King of the Monsters. But for Shin Godzilla, there was indeed quite a lot of marketing, especially with the whole Godzilla versus Evangelion cross promotion, which I know the fans went nuts over.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the funny thing, cross promotions are actually really common in Japan. Every month I see a new cross promotion between an anime and a company, a mobile game, an anime style mobile game, and McDonald's, even a Gundam and a fucking curry shop. What was it? Evangelion again, and a chain of restaurants called Nakao. So it's these cross promotions are super common in Japan. You're always going to see a new entertainment property get paired up with either another entertainment property or a business property.
One thing I want to say about the Shin Godzilla marketing thing is that by all accounts, nobody in Toho thought that Shin Godzilla would be what it became.
Right.
Like even Shinji Higuchi at G-Fest admitted that he always thought the film would make money, but he did not know that it was going to be the big sensation that it became. Now, my speculation, and this is just again my speculation, but I imagine that at Toho, when they saw the film and they realized what they had on their hands, that's when they realized that this was something that could definitely make a mark box office wise, and then they decided to go the extra mile as far as promoting and advertising. Again, that's my speculation. Oh, yeah. But again, knowing from the fact that the film's very creators, one of the co-creators had no idea it would be as big as it was.
Yeah.
That makes me really think that they were just like, okay, well, we'll hope that it makes money and such, that people see it. Mm-hmm. Then when they saw the final product and realized what they had, they were like, okay, let's go out of our way to promote this and make sure that a lot of people know about this and see it.
Oh yeah. I mean, this was like they actually went out of their way to partner with Funimation to give this an American release, and to even go so far as to give it an extension, which is something I've personally never seen before for its American release. They went out of its way to make an English dub for I know people were upset that there was no English dub for the American release, but here's the thing, it's like that American release was actually went by a lot faster than your typical Japan to America release date. Usually it would take like roughly a year for a Japanese movie to come to America, whereas here they did it in the span of like 4 months. I think it was released when I know it was like around August, it was in America. Okay, so it was in July in Japan, and in America it was released October. Okay, so that's like 3 months later. Let's say August, September. Yeah, about 3 months later. So that's like a significantly short amount of time compared to other releases. So for people who are like, oh, it's taking them forever to bring Godzilla to America, it's like, you have no idea. And people could tell, like, there was, like, still a lot of Japanese text that they never got around to removing from that version of the film. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which by the way,
I saw Shin Godzilla again at a screening recently.
Okay.
And the print that we showed this time, 3 years later, all that Japanese text on the screen is gone now.
Okay. Was that replaced with? I know that was sort of like part of the joke where it's like everything is categorized because we're seeing everything through the view of these politicians. Was that still the case with the English version? Did they have like English text instead, or was there just no text?
Yeah, they put subtitles to I don't know, what you call them, not intertitles,
captions.
Yeah, you put captions on the screen like Rondo Yaguchi, head of the
blah 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly. They just replaced it with an English text. Yes.
Okay, that's good because several film critics that I follow would complain about the fact that there is like Japanese subtitles and then there's like English subtitles on top of the Japanese subtitles. Mm-hmm. There was definitely a lot of buzz around it. It got a very fast American release. It got a lot of international releases. I remember the fans were covering that as it went along. I think there was a leaked version of it that had like 40 minutes cut out of the movie that people got their hands on. Let's see what else. There was, of course, the marketing was crazy. Everybody was on board because of Anno and Evangelion. Even despite the fact that Godzilla is nowhere near as popular as it once was in Japan, people are nuts over Evangelion. And Hideaki Anno is one of like the very few people, the other person probably being Miyazaki, that people know like the actual names of these auteur individuals. In Japan, most people don't really care about who is directing what. Whereas in America, a lot of marketing is like from the director of this movie, from the producers of this movie, from the writer of this movie. Whereas in Japan, that's rarely the case. So for Anno, one of the few people whose name has a recognizable name be attached, that was bound to bring a lot of attention to it. And of course, there was a large word of mouth spread throughout Japan about this movie, and people really got on board with this film and its message. I think people in Japan were more interested in the overall political subtext of the movie than actually Godzilla himself. Mm-hmm. And it's really impressive to see how, for a lot of people in Japan, this is their first Godzilla movie. Yeah. And in fact, for children who never got around to seeing the movie, they probably saw this version of Godzilla somewhere, somehow, be it at Universal Studios Japan or on that crossover episode with Shin-chan. Very bizarre choice, by the way. In fact, when one of my child students noticed the Godzilla keychain on my bag, like my laptop bag, they say, "Is that Shin Godzilla?" They specifically said Shin Godzilla, thinking that the character is called Shin Godzilla, not Godzilla. So again, very, very interesting, very curious to see this sort of development here with this new generation's introduction to Godzilla. So yeah, looking at the movie itself, yeah, it's definitely I've mentioned this from the beginning when I first saw this movie in Japan. I think I was perhaps one of the first Americans to really talk about it on YouTube. Although I'm more than I know for a fact that I'm most likely not. But it's a very not surreal, but like a very experimental movie. Definitely ignored a lot of the tropes you would see, or a lot of the cinematic techniques. Instead, it really tried to do its own thing, making this feel like more like a session of C-SPAN more than an action, like, or a part of me hates to use this phrase because of the person who taught me this. It felt like a docudrama. Only a few of us are gonna know why we're laughing. Yeah, but it truly did feel like a documentary style approach to this story. This political thriller, as opposed to an action sci-fi thriller.
It's basically sort of like a stylistic homage to a film by Anno's favorite filmmaker Kihachi Okamoto called Japan's Longest Day.
And what was that movie about?
That was about Japan's final 24 hours before the surrender of World War II.
Oh, okay.
And if you watch that film, you'll see where Anno got his visual and editing inspirations, because Shin Godzilla is almost stylistically almost carbon copied from Shin Godzilla. From Japan's Longest Day. Okay. Same kind of shots, same kind of editing, splashing. First of all, I should say the technique of putting Japanese text on the screen to tell us about which character we're looking at is very common in a lot of Japanese films, especially of that time. But it is especially prevalent in Japan's Longest Day.
I see then.
Oh, and by the way, Kihachi Okamoto appears in Shin Godzilla via photograph. He's the photograph of the mysterious Dr. Goro Maki that you see.
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right then, and it's a very unique Godzilla movie. I'll definitely give it that. And much like Godzilla Godzilla Final Wars, it's one of those movies, or even Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah Giant Monsters Auto Attack. This is definitely like a movie that was heavily influenced by its director. He definitely left his mark on the film, and it's a very specific style that some people are gonna dig. Some people are not gonna dig. Some people can get behind this, and others are gonna absolutely detest this. I know, personally, you and I are on opposite ends of in terms of how we feel about Shin Godzilla, and it's almost kind of similar to Evangelion in a way, where Evangelion has also had this very divisive reaction to it, where some people like its more darker, twisted, more psychological, downright depressing take on mecha anime, and other people don't and find it very obnoxious and pretentious, and the characters are unlikable. So it's I don't know, for a movie to get so many different reactions, I kind of see that as a bit of an accomplishment, if you're able to create so many reactions and interpretations off of your own creation. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it proves that you made something that is kind of at least for the moment, kind of noteworthy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a mark of quality per se, but I think that I think that it definitely proves that you made something that at least for the moment got noticed and will be the real question is will people still be talking and debating many years down the road? That's where the true measure of a film's longevity will come into play, because films can be debated. There have been cases throughout history, countless times, where films were debated and discussed and argued for sometimes even 10 years. But 20 years later, nobody cares anymore.
Kind of reminds me of the recent Ghostbusters movie. People were so heavily divisive on the movie, and now nobody cares.
Yeah, exactly. Because I already forgot about that film and the reaction to it. Case in point.
Yeah. And so I feel like even though we're still only a couple years removed from 2016, Shin Godzilla still feels like this very bizarre, like a black sheep of the franchise, where it's like it's a one-off Godzilla movie, but it's a one-off movie that's like sort of left to its own devices, where it's not like Godzilla 2000, where it's a standalone movie in a series of standalone movies. Shin Godzilla is kind of left all to itself as Toho claims that they want to make a World of Godzilla cinematic universe of their own, while leaving Shin Godzilla to be its own like one and done project, while they're going to start a new series that has nothing to do with that. And,
of course, the reason why is because of their contract with Legendary.
Right. So, like, Shin Godzilla was meant to be a one and done project in terms of live action movies. Meanwhile, they're not allowed to make any live action movies until after 2020, I believe. Yes,
because that's another reason why I think that it was more than just a good timing, as Toho likes to claim. I think it was because as Shinji Higuchi himself will tell you, the reason why Shin Godzilla and here's the funny thing, is that Shin Godzilla was released in summer of 2016, not in December, as is usually the case with Godzilla films.
Right.
Toho usually likes to show them in like December, so they can show them like film festivals, etc., and so forth. But they chose to release Shin Godzilla in the middle of 2016, and and here's the reason why. As Higuchi will tell you, it's because they were looking at their contract with Legendary. Oh. And again, this is a big reason why I seriously doubt it was more than just good timing on Toho's part. Their contract stated, they looked at the figures and said, okay, we can, per our agreement, we can release a picture as long as we fit it into between these two dates, between 2014 and a certain amount of time before what was going to be the 2018 release of Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Right. It was before it got delayed. Yeah.
Yes. And so and per that agreement, Toho said, okay, make sure it's released in the middle of 2016, not at the end. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason why. And and again, and you can't go past that date, which is why there has not been a Shin Godzilla 2 or another live action Godzilla film. And per their agreement with Legendary, they can't make one until after 2020.
Just even though I guess I'll ask you this question about the world of Godzilla when we talk about the potential future of the series. Mm-hmm. But since we're going to talk about like the making of Godzilla, we alluded before in previous parts that Toho nowadays don't really make their own movies these days. And in terms of the production of Shin Godzilla, it being a very like a special effects heavy film, at least compared to other movies made in Japan, which are mostly just like period pieces or dramas, they've really like outsourced a lot of their work towards other special effects company. Am I right? Mm.
Yes. The CGI for Shin Godzilla was not done at Toho. It was done by various animation companies around Japan. Right. Which is why the quality of the CGI varies so drastically between scenes sometimes.
Oh yeah. And I would say like maybe like the best CGI sequences are the ones that they decided they chose for the trailer.
Yeah, like the sequence where Godzilla is in combat with the military, like with the tanks and such.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the company, but it was that the animation there was done by a company which does a lot of video game animation.
Okay.
So they have a lot, and so they have a lot of experience designing things like mechanical machines and buildings, et cetera, and so forth. And I think that's the reason why that sequence is probably the most polished sequence as far as CGI in that movie goes.
Yeah.
Then you have things like
the trains.
The trains weightlessly bouncing off Godzilla into the air. You have Kamada-kun warbling and twitching as he quote unquote evolves, and it varies from scene to scene in terms of quality. And again, the reason why is because it was done by various animation houses around the country. It was not done in one place under one man's supervision.
Now, do you think the old school sound effects and roars, do you think that was a budget thing or more of a stylistic thing from Anno?
I think it was more of a stylistic thing, if you ask me.
Okay, so it's
just like how he likes to create like visual homages to certain films in the movie.
True,
like the opening shot is basically a carbon copy of the opening shot of Godzilla 54.
Oh yeah. What else? One thing I didn't notice, like when I first heard that all those familiar Ifukube theme songs from throughout Godzilla's history, I initially thought that they just plucked those tracks straight from the original scores. But to my surprise, I believe those are brand new renditions of those classic scores.
No, they're not.
No, they're not? Oh, okay. I thought they were, because I could have sworn that someone like pointed out the differences between like the original version and the Shin Godzilla version.
Well, I've not seen that, and I would dispute that in a heartbeat, because they sound like they're recorded on the exact same kind of systems as the original tracks were.
Right. That's why I initially thought that they were directly lifted from the original soundtrack, because they had that tinny, old school sound quality to them. And maybe that was made in post-production, but no. Now I'm thinking about it, that sounds like way too much work on Toho's part, too.
I have the soundtrack for Shin Godzilla, and I don't hear any differences between the like say the King Kong versus Godzilla theme that plays in the film and the exact same track that I hear on my King Kong versus Godzilla soundtrack CD.
Right. Okay. So I could be wrong there, but I thought, it was a very interesting choice for them, and it's definitely just Anno wanting to mix in some old school stuff and with some new, like maybe he's trying to give it like taking the idea, like even the whole story itself is basically a typical Godzilla story of Godzilla invading Japan and Japan learning finding a way to stop it. So it's a classical Godzilla backdrop with Anno's docudrama style to it. So it's like mixing, again, it's a mixture of old and new there. I definitely enjoy listening, I do feel nostalgic listening to all those tracks there. Going all the way to Mechagodzilla 2, strangely enough, which I think may have been the only Heisei or 90s era track in there.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so it was kind of a bit of a strange outlier there, as it was saved for the ending credits.
Mm-hmm.
But right from the get-go, that opening that opening is clearly made as an homage to the opening title sequence of Godzilla 54. So it's like, I could tell that Anno and Higuchi were definitely big fans of Godzilla and really wanted to. For one, get the vibe that they really do respect the character and wish to try to make it an authentic Godzilla movie while definitely trying to put their own spin on it. I don't know. How do you think that they were genuine Godzilla fans about the whole thing?
Well, I don't dispute that. I don't dispute the fact that they enjoy Godzilla. And the fact that Anno goes out of his way. But here's another thing I will say though is that just creating a visual homage to something is not in of itself a measure of quality.
Right.
Godzilla versus Destroya, and it's not even a measure of it's not even like proof of being a fan of anything. Godzilla versus Destroya, which as we discussed earlier, was made by a man who is not really a Godzilla fan.
True.
That movie itself also has a lot of visual homages to the original film.
Oh, that is true. Yeah.
It opens with a shot of traveling across the water like 54. It's got the a G-54. The opening title for G-54 appears during the main credits. There's a sequence where they imagine Godzilla about to blow up, where he's walking past the Hattori clock tower, just like in G-54. And things like that. It's visually homaging something is it can be an indicator of being a fan of something. It does not necessarily mean that you are a fan of something, but it's very well known that Anno is a fan of this kind of thing, and Higuchi, of course, has a background in tokusatsu and such.
True. I just wonder if this came from a place of passion, because I know the real reason why Anno got on board with this was because Gainax was in serious financial trouble after the release of Rebuild of Evangelion 3.0, and so he did this so Toho could specifically fund the fourth and final Evangelion movie of his, and to help bring Gainax out of bankruptcy. But a part of me does believe that this movie came from a place of passion, as opposed to, while the money was a motivation, I feel like this felt a bit more like there was a lot of passion put into it.
Oh, I'm sure it was. He's never been shy about admitting that he likes this kind of thing. Uh-huh. And as I mentioned before, it's visually and aesthetically, pretty much an homage to his favorite director ever, Kihachi Okamoto. Mm. So I'm sure for him on that level it was it was an absolute passion project, joy to do, whatever you want to call it.
Uh-huh. And the last thing I wanted to bring up here was the overall reaction to Shin Godzilla, where we alluded to it before, where it's like, Japan definitely went nuts for this. And I find it very interesting how in this time and era, in an age after the 3/11 event from, I believe, 2011, with the tsunami followed by the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the way the government handled things, it felt like this was definitely a movie that catered more to the Japanese audience than any other Godzilla movie in a while, I think. And I think that's probably why Japan reacted so strongly in favor of this movie, and how it ended up receiving the acclamation that it eventually went on to receive. It does feel like this was a movie that was made for a Japanese audience, more so than anyone else. And I find that to be another rather interesting thing about this movie. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, I have noticed that, whenever I look at reactions to the movie from Japanese audiences, the one thing I notice, and also one thing I notice is that the one thing people never talk about is the monster itself.
Very true. Yeah.
I always see things like, I thought it was quotes like, I never thought the JSDF could fight. That movie made me feel proud to be Japanese. Another quote like, and very often they latch onto the criticism of the old guard government.
Uh-huh.
Which is definitely prevalent in the first 30 minutes or so of Shin Godzilla. That's basically what the first third of the film, the first 30 minutes is focused on, making the old guard, old-fashioned bureaucrats look foolish and stupid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. This is a movie that's definitely very critical of the Japanese government. And from what I can understand from what my students have told me, it's like a lot of people have been very resentful of the government in recent years. And that I guess a lot of people really enjoyed this movie because they thought they were surprised to see someone, I guess, quote unquote, brave enough or daring enough to say what everyone else was thinking.
Mm-hmm. That's why I don't really see Shin Godzilla as a movie about 3/11. I mean, the 3/11 stuff is there, but it's more of a support beam for what the film is really all about. Because after all, mm-hmm. Once Kamada-kun goes back into the sea, the movie basically stops being a 3/11 parallel. After that point, it becomes about hotshot bureaucrats and patriots replacing the old guard. It becomes about rewriting Article 9 of the Constitution to give the Japanese self-defense forces more authority, more power, quick to act. It becomes about the old guard government, resigning en masse and these new patriots taking over. It becomes about things that are frankly not about 3/11. And here's the thing that really cements it for me is that the finale in which Godzilla is taken out definitely has parallels to 3/11. With the boom pump trucks.
The boom what?
The boom pump trucks, which were the same where they that pour the chemicals into his mouth.
Oh, those things. Okay.
Which were the exact same kind of machines that were used to help shut down and cool off the Fukushima reactor.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the thing that comes after. What happens after that though? As soon as Godzilla is defeated, Laptop Girl says, "Oh, hey guys, check this out. Godzilla has a really short half-life. So in 2-3 years, all of his radiation will just go away, and there's no consequences as far as radioactive contamination and such." Meantime, Fukushima is still a big problem, 8 years later.
Oh yeah. No one is going to go back to that area anytime soon.
And also at the end of the picture when the main politician guy and the U.S. envoy girl, when they're staying on the balcony, they're not talking about the dangers of nuclear technology. They're not talking about the problems of nuclear this or nuclear that. Uh-huh. They're talking about how sweet things are going to be from now on, that they have a new government working in Japan, and we have a nice ally who is, in her own words, on her way to the Oval Office one day.
Right. They're talking about rebuilding, at the moment the government is in shambles, and that together they're going to rebuild it from the ground up into something stronger so that they'd be ready for when Godzilla returns. I definitely see that, where it's a very, I can see how, people have interpreted this movie as a very nationalistic or nationalist driven narrative, and I can definitely see how people have come to that conclusion.
Yeah, keep in mind, I'm not denying the 311 parallels. I'm just saying that they're not the focus of the film. It's a support beam which which holds up the dominant theme of the picture, and which leads into what the movie is really all about.
About having more power, or having as much power equal.
About Japan being autonomous and on its own, and having more and also
self-reliant.
Self-reliance and fleshing out the bureaucrats who won't get things done quick enough.
I see then. And maybe it's just me, but I get the feeling that perhaps maybe a lot of audiences, and I can't speak for all audiences, but from the people that I have talked to who have seen this movie, they seemed more receptive to the 311 parallels than with any of the militaristic driven stuff. So I think we had this conversation before as to the different interpretations of Shin Godzilla in the past, and I'm thinking, is it possible that maybe the quote unquote true ambitions of this movie maybe were lost to the Japanese audience to some degree, but I can't really be sure unless I do more research.
It could be, sometimes just look at here's an example with Anno. Mm-hmm. Look at the kind of things people try to see in Evangelion that simply are not there.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. It's the exact opposite, where it's like he didn't mean it to be this way, but other people interpret it to be that way. And that's kind of like the thing about art in a way, where it's like art is totally subjective, totally interpretive to the audience. Sure, people can mean certain things in their artwork, but because art is sort of interpretive in nature, people are going to get what they want to get out of that movie or out of that piece of art. So, yeah, that's definitely quite a conundrum there, where it's like what does a piece of media or art truly mean, and whether or not it was the artist's intention. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I feel like that's another complicated can of philosophical worms for another day.
Oh no, I'll just leave this off for you. If you want to hear a really weird and bizarre interpretation of a Godzilla film, read Dan Schneider's analysis of Godzilla's Revenge. You'll be like, what?
Wait, Dan Schneider. Wait a minute. Okay, yeah, I think you told me. You told me about this. Okay, it's funny enough. It's when you first told me about Dan Schneider, I was thinking the guy from Nickelodeon, the all that Drake and Josh iCarly foot fetish dude.
Yep, same name, different guy, but yeah, just look it up on Google. You'll find it pretty quickly, and you're halfway through, you'll be like, wait, are you serious? To quote Kyle Van Patterson, are you serious?
You got to sound more drunken and slurred than that. Are you serious? Oh, poor girl, man. Everybody heard she was emotionally distraught, having to memorize all these English lines. It's like, fuck, man, I can't do this. It's so funny because it's I have students who can speak a lot more clearer than that because they actually can speak decent enough English. Mm-hmm. It's funny, I would tell my students, it's your English is so much better than hers in the movie, and really? It's yes! it doesn't, I guess for the Japanese audiences, they can't tell when certain English performances are bad or not. But then again, in return, they can tell whether Japanese accent is authentic or not in our movies.
Oh yeah, I think I mentioned this on that the live stream on Greg Nunman's channel that you and I were on. That when Sean Connery made a film called Rising Sun,
yeah,
the Japanese spoken in that film was just like, in Japan, in America, everybody's like, oh hey, that sounds authentic to me, but in Japan, everybody scoffed and jeered at it because to them it did not sound natural whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah, it works both ways.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, for each country, everybody sounds like they got to stick up their ass.
You're right.
Oh boy. So, anything else to talk about with Shin Godzilla?
Not unless you have anything specific you want to delve into or talk about.
Let's see. I will say though, in terms of the community as a whole, I feel like Shin Godzilla really did a good job for a number of Godzilla YouTubers' careers. Especially for those kind of YouTubers that follow like Kaiju or Godzilla related news, that definitely helped spike their channels a lot. The one that immediately comes to mind is D-Man 1954. I think, I can't be sure, but I know I started noticing his channel around the time when Shin Godzilla was coming out. And, he would always do these news videos. The Omniviewer also does these sort of things. So I would say during this time, I think even for back in the 2014 days, our friend Bill Worcester, Zazubar, he would make videos concerning the news regarding Godzilla 2014. And that's when his channel was on the rise. So it's I started noticing around the time of Shin Godzilla that sort of a newer generation of Godzilla fans were coming into existence, at least gaining a presence online. It's there were the older Godzilla YouTubers Goji70, was his name Goji 76? Goji 73? 73, yes. He was around for a while. I think Goji Fan 93, he was around shortly before Bill then eventually came around, and then I came out in 2012. But I was after Bill, David, and I came onto YouTube, I feel like there was the next group of people that came out in the wake of Shin Godzilla, and again, that's something that I find interesting to note. And how, as years progress and people get older, more people are inspired to go on to social media and gain a new presence, presence for themselves, or make a name out for themselves within the fandom itself. Let's see. So, moving on ahead to Beyond Shin Godzilla. So, we mentioned before that Toho was not allowed to make any new live-action movies, with Shin Godzilla being the one exception. So, instead, they went to animation. And when this was announced, I know I was very excited to hear that, because, I'm sure me and a lot of other Godzilla fans always wanted to see Godzilla properly done in animation by Japan themselves. We had, Hanna-Barbera Godzilla. We had the TriStar Sony animated series. We had Godzilla vs. Bambi, if you want to count that. But beyond Shin-Chan versus Shin Godzilla, there was never a proper Godzilla animated Godzilla project. Well, okay. There was Godzillaland, or Gojirando, which was, baby Godzilla and his friends teaching children math and katakana. But again, a true to form, serious attempt at an animated Godzilla. And the moment I heard Polygon Pictures' name, I thought, shit. So yes, this is when I heard there was going to be 3D animation. It's I know this is going to look like crap. It's going to have a low frame rate. It's going to have that weird, awkward 3D animation attempting to replicate the look and feel of 2D animation, which looks awkward as hell. But hey, Japan is a stickler for tradition, so we ended up with this project. But it's I find they ended up Toho ended up partnering up with Polygon Pictures again, They don't make their own movies. They get other people to make their movies for them. Apparently, this was meant to be a TV series, a television series, or at least a multi-episode series, but somehow along the way, this got changed, plans were changed, and it was turned into a trilogy of films that were released in 2017 and 2018, although I think in America it was released in 2018 and later 2019. And that gave us the final movies of the Heisei period. And that would be Godzilla, Planet of the Monsters, Godzilla, City on the Edge of Battle, and Godzilla, the Planet Eater. And with this movie, it's like such a bizarre installment in the Godzilla franchise for me, because it's like, it features so many brilliant ideas, so many crazy, weird, hardcore sci-fi out there concepts, and manages to fuck it up every step of the way with such a lackluster execution, to the point where I keep asking myself, how the hell did this get made did it get made this way? It's like, I'm more curious about the behind the scenes the behind the scenes stories behind this movie than the actual movies themselves. And again, just to make it clear, I'm not one of those fans who hates it because it's different. After all, I liked Shin Godzilla. But it's like, again, I'm okay with experimenting with Godzilla. I just want to see it done well. And for me, these were great ideas, but it wasn't done well at all. I would love to see an idea of a post-apocalyptic world where Godzilla grew into this massive monster and humanity is on the brink of extinction and they're having one last bout with Godzilla and all the crazy monsters that exist on Earth, and as they try to stake a claim in all of this, and while dealing with the overgrowing sense of dread and like what do you call it? Overcoming their personal flaws within each other. Sounds like great on paper, but I just wonder how did it came to be this way. And the biggest thing I have to say about these movies is that it feels like too much content for 3 movies to explore, but at the same time, there's not enough meat on the bones for there to be 3 movies to begin with. It feels like too much, at the same time, not enough. And it's such a weird dichotomy that I've never really experienced before in any other movie series. Yeah, because it feels like there's so many concepts that are never explored in this trilogy, but at the same time, the few concepts that are slightly explored, they're not explored enough. So it likes to pick and choose, and the stuff that it does pick and choose doesn't do anything with them.
Right.
But I feel like I've been talking too much about this. But what were your personal thoughts when the movies were coming out and when the movies did eventually come out? Because I know, like, I'm not sure if you were ever got paid to write for the previous Godzilla movies, but I know that you were definitely the go-to guy for you were Sci-Fi Wire's go-to guy for this whole trilogy.
Yes, unfortunately.
But hey, I would say this: you are the voice of reason. I looked forward to every one of your articles.
Yes, unfortunately, I had to. Here's a sad story for you. I had to get up at 5 a.m. to watch Godzilla the Planet Eater because my editors wanted it done by a certain amount of time. So I wanted to see it before my day job so I could write my review over lunch.
Yeah.
And so that meant I either had to stay up super late the night before to watch it when it came out on Netflix at midnight by that day, or I could get up super early in the morning and watch it before I left. And I chose to go with the second option. I'm sure it was just like the lack of sleep that I couldn't stay awake, that I could barely keep my eyes open the whole film, right? Right?
Then again, it was the Planet Eater.
Anyways, leading up to the films, I didn't really have a whole lot of thoughts on them because I wasn't really like following them that much.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I didn't know too much about the people behind the films either. Suffice it to say, so it was just like a case of me going like, okay, let's just wait and see, what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw was wow, pretty wretched. Like novelty in and of itself is not good enough for me.
Right. And for some people, that novelty factor is good enough for them, and most people like this trilogy on the basis of, hey, it's doing something crazy and new with Godzilla. That's perfectly fine for you to think that way. It's just, it was not good enough for us.
Yeah, it was novelty in of itself is not good enough for me. To me, it's a description. It's an adjective. It's not a measure of quality or of anything.
You can describe to me the premise of these movies, and I'll get the same enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it has nothing to do with merit or or whether a film's going to have a kind of longevity as far as my my relationship with it, or whether I'm going to think about it the day after or whatever. Mm-hmm. God, so do you want like some general thoughts as about the whole trilogy or what?
Let's see. Sure, let's go with that.
Okay, well, first of all,
because again, much like the later half of the Heisei of the Versus era of the 90s, all these movies just kind of mixed together into one big ball of blah.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are. Well, actually, I'll preface by saying this. I will say that if you share my sentiments as far as these films go, you should at least give the creators of the series a chance as far as their other work goes.
Oh yeah.
I can't speak as far as the two directors go. I can't speak about Kobo and Shizuno, but Hiroyuki Seshida has made some good stuff. I recently saw a film it wasn't recent. It was a couple of years ago, but I saw a film he did called Blame, which was a post-apocalyptic short thriller anime feature length. And it was a film which was kind of thin in terms of story and dramatics, but it was visually exciting. It was very intense. It was very stylistic in a good way, and it was incessantly entertaining. Which is all the more credit to him as the filmmaker, that he took a kind of a thin, flimsy script and made a fun movie out of it. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, screenwriter Gen Urobuchi.
Oh yeah, he's perhaps the biggest name attached to this project.
Oh, without question.
He was sort of the Hideaki Anno to this project, but for what it did not turn out as successful as that.
Yeah. I can't claim to be an expert on Urobuchi. I could write his biography, but what I have seen from his work has, for the most part, been very impressive. Mm-hmm. For example, I walked into his most famous project, Poila Madoka Magi Madoka Magica. I can never pronounce it right the first time.
Madoka Maguka.
Exactly. Which is an example of the magical girl anime subgenre.
Right.
And the only reason why I was going to watch it was just to get an idea of his track record. Okay, I'll watch this stupid magical girl fantasy bullshit. Yeah. I'll watch an episode of it, and then just walk away and say, okay, I got an idea. That was enough.
Yeah.
And much to my surprise, I actually watched the whole show over the course of 2 evenings.
Nice.
Yeah. Which is saying a lot I me, given that I'm not a huge anime enthusiast in general.
Right. Yeah. Let alone magical girl anime.
Yeah, precisely.
I was hoping that nobody Kate walked in on you watching the series. You're like, it's for research.
Yeah, but much to my surprise, it was exceedingly well written, and unlike the Godzilla animes, it had characters who I was from the very beginning interested in. And and here's the key thing. After watching the show, and even now, probably a year or so later, after having watched it, I could still write you a very detailed biography of all the characters from memory. I would struggle to do the same with the characters of the anime trilogy. Now, I know they have quote unquote arcs going on in them, but it's faded from my memory so quickly that I would struggle to get by with it.
So we got Haruo, he's the angry boy. Yuko, she's the girl. What was it? Miana, the nice twin, the innocent twin. Mina, the bitchy twin. Metphis, who for earlier today I was trying to remember his name. It's oh fuck, I can't remember his name, and he's the best character. He's the sneaky villain. He's a sneaky sneaker. The Bellaboo and the other, all the other guys, they're techno geniuses. And there's a dude who's a doctor. And there's an old alien Exif guy who's also a sneaky dude, just older with more wrinkles, and the end.
Yeah, here's a prime example. A while back, I was just cruising Netflix, and I saw like the title cards for both Planet of the Monsters and City on the Edge of Battle. Yeah. And they had characters. They had the characters for the title cards, not the monsters. Uh-huh. And I recognized the guy on Sid. And for City on the Edge of Battle, I recognized the Bilu Salatu guy.
Yeah.
For Planet of the Monster, they showed one of the human characters, and I was like, my literal reaction is, who is that? I literally had no idea who he was. It wasn't Haru. It wasn't Yuko. And
was it blonde guy number 4?
And yes, I guess. I'm not sure if it was 4 or 15 or 25 or 60 or whatever.
It's even really bad when like everyone is wearing their helmets and you can still see your faces. All the characters in the backgrounds literally have like black spray painted like masks on, just so they don't have to like they can just copy and paste the same character model over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Like you, I don't dispute the fact that there are a lot of interesting ideas at play in the anime trilogy. And I don't object to to reiterate and emphasize this point, I don't object to the idea of doing something novel in theory with Godzilla. But for me, that's not good enough. You've got to execute it with a story that grabs me. You got to give me characters I can care about. Yeah. And you've got to handle it in a way that that will grab my attention and hold it. Uh-huh. And from the start, it's just like the ideas are not handled in a way that's very interesting, as far as I'm concerned. And the direction and the editing in particular feels extremely lethargic, very clunky, and at times very amateurish. Like especially you look at like for someone like you've experienced a lot of these creators' past works, and yeah, I'm assuming it must have come off as like a half-assed or half-hearted effort. Yeah, like the last time I suffered through Anime Part 2, there were a lot of points where I was watching the film like wait, there were a lot of parts where I felt like there were key shots missing in the film, in the scenes. Like one that comes to mind is like when Haru and one of the twins, I don't remember which one it was, first meet, and Haru's walking in like this pit that has like these things in them.
Snakes?
I think. I don't remember. It was something. But anyway, it's like we cut from a shot of Haru looking down, cut to a shot of the snake things, cut to all of a sudden to a random shot of the bird monster things flying in the sky, and then cut to Haru climbing out of the pit. Like, wait, is there a couple of shots missing? It felt like they didn't fully animate the scene. That cut to the birds, it felt like they ran out of money to finish the sequence. So they cut to a static filler shot to make up for it. It's like it feels like scenes are missing here. It just comes. Yeah. It's not very well done. It's not very well. It's not very appealing visually. It has none of the flair that I saw from Seshida's work in Blame. It's just slow, lethargic, uninteresting, boring, dull, and it's just unbelievably uninteresting as far as execution goes. Again, the ideas in themselves have potential. They're not realized in a way that I myself personally find engaging.
And it's not,
stylistically, execution-wise, the film is not enjoyable enough to make up for it. For me.
Yeah, it's a very dull. It's not on top of having a dull story. You just have a very dull-looking movie, and it feels like they were like cutting corners at every stop at every point, where it feels like they're constantly like reusing textures, locations, character models, like everywhere you go. So like everywhere just looks the same, and a lot of environments, especially like the most egregious one being like the Holtua tribe. The entire environment just looks barren, like devoid of life, despite this being supposedly where a civilization of like post-apocalyptic humans live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, to emphasize it once more, I do not object to the idea of trying something different.
Right.
It's the execution that I take major issue with.
Right.
Because I found it cataclysmically uninteresting and unrewarding, in terms of delivery, and aesthetically, it was just not exciting or interesting enough to make up for it for me.
Uh-huh. In fact, I would probably say the most entertaining part about this whole thing was the cross-promotion artwork. I think it was like Godzilla and Pacific Rim Uprising. Oh, there's a duo of disappointments right there. And there was a cross-promotion between Godzilla, Planet Eater, and Mobile Suit Gundam Narrative. Seeing Godzilla and Gundam in an official piece of merchandise together was really cool for me. But the only other things I could say is, like, again, I'm more curious as to how all of this came to be, and I don't think we'll ever get a full picture as to how this all went down unless, we're far removed from when these movies are made, which is something we mentioned before when it came to talking about how these, how the Showa and Heisei movies came to be. Because as these movies came out, we did had Gen Urobuchi and the director Seshita like defending these choices, sort of, especially in Seshita's case, like giving backhanded remarks at the quote-unquote traditionalists who did not like these movies. Of course, he's working for a studio. He's got to advertise these movies. He's got to put these movies in a positive light. So it's like, of course he's going to defend these movies so they can make as much money. So it's like, it's very typical of anyone who is promoting a movie, so I don't blame him for saying that stuff. I'm not going to get offended at it. But I just can't take his word for it. There was an interview that was translated a couple times stating that Urobuchi wanted to bring in some cool throwbacks to bring back some cool concepts, but each concept was shot down by the director, which kind of makes him come off to be a bit of a Toho yes man. But then it was like, oh, he was just joking and he wasn't serious about making those suggestions. So we're left with more questions than answers. So like my big question about this is, what was the motivation behind making this bizarre series of animated movies? And from everything that the director claims, it seems like they're trying to market these movies to a brand new audience in the wake of Shin Godzilla. And, now these days, the Japanese a lot of audiences are into anime, so they'll make an anime. People like sci-fi dramas, they'll make a sci-fi drama. They like angsty teenage anime boys, they'll make an angsty teenage anime boy. They like their waifus, so they'll put in some waifus here. So at first I was behind that. It's like, okay, you want to adhere to a brand new audience of people who normally do not like Godzilla. So they want to take something, sprinkle in a bunch of anime tropes, and take out what people normally ignore when it comes to Godzilla. Okay, sure. I can understand that reasoning. But then every single decision they make regarding the releases of these movies contradicts all of that. So they decided to give these movies very limited releases in Japan, to the point where these movies actually didn't do all that well, and almost nobody got to see them. Sure, they...
by the way, having lived in Japan, how would you compare the marketing for these films compared to the marketing for Shin Godzilla?
Abysmal compared to Shin Godzilla. Again, everybody knew Shin Godzilla was a thing, surprisingly enough. Nobody knew the anime was a thing, unless they went into Toho Cinema, which is like their biggest theater chain, much like our AMC, and they happened to stumble across a mini movie poster next to a bunch of other mini movie posters.
So you didn't see like a lot of TV spots or like public advertisement?
Fuck no. I saw everything you saw, my friend.
That's what I expected.
But with Yeah. So I mentioned, like, these movies were barely advertised. Nobody knew about them. They claim that for a limited release, they actually did pretty well. But again, that's all PR talk. I don't trust them. So then people would probably say, oh, they're just putting all their chips into the Netflix basket. Here's the thing. Netflix is not that popular, is not popular at all in Japan. In fact, they still rely on movie rental shops, whereas we gave up on those like long ago in the early 2010s. So barely anyone has a Netflix account, so almost less people are watching these movies that are exclusively on Netflix now. So who are the only people who are going to watch these movies? People in countries where Netflix is more popular, namely America. And because they barely do any marketing, who are the only people who are really aware of these movies' existence? Godzilla fans! So despite the fact that they want to make these movies for a brand new audience and not the pre-existing Godzilla fans, the only people watching these movies are pre-existing Godzilla fans.
Mm-hmm.
So this leads me to ask, who were these movies made for, and what was the motivation behind these movies? And that's when Robert Scott Field made a short post on Facebook that kind of put this whole thing into a new perspective. What if this entire endeavor was simply made to fail so that it can be turned into a tax write-off in order to recuperate whatever money they owed to the government in the wake of Shin Godzilla's unexpected success? So, what do you think about that theory, Patrick?
It makes more sense to me than the claim that they were trying to appeal to a new audience in Japan. That's for sure. I mean, the fact that it was, given a limited release and, promoted through a streaming platform, which is not really caught on in its own country. Like, why wasn't it like shown on television or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Just I don't have the insights into the insights into Toho. Like some people do. Like I don't deal with them directly or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you know what? It makes more sense to me than what Toho itself claims. But I think the bottom line, as far as these go, as far as the animes go, and what Toho want them to be and how they want them to perform, I think the big bottom line is who the hell knows.
Right.
really, who knows?
And I guess at this point, who the hell cares?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because, like, the moment, like, the last movie came, people were talking about it. Of course, people were going to be divisive about it, like any modern Godzilla movie. But then, like 2 weeks later just a week later, that new Godzilla King of the Monsters trailer came out, and everyone forgot about the anime trilogy.
Yep.
I'll guarantee you this, man. No, I doubt anyone is going to be, unless you're selling it to the hardcore collectors, I doubt you're going to see anything anime Godzilla related at this year's G-Fest.
Yeah, I'll be shocked.
I mean, I'll be
heck, I'll say this much. G-Fest 2017 was a Shin Godzilla year. I mean, Shin Godzilla was the subject of 2017. Not just because you had Shinji Higuchi there as the guest, but because the movie struck a chord with audiences.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a significant portion of people who found the movie enjoyable.
Well, here's another first-hand example. I'll tell you. I've alluded to a couple of times that I've been attending screenings of the Japanese Godzilla films lately. That's because one of the Alamo Drafthouse theaters in my area, I've been introducing the films for them over the course of this month,
which is fucking awesome, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. And the first one we showed was Shin Godzilla, and when I was talking with the projectionist afterwards, he said that he absolutely loved the film.
Oh,
he really got into it. I mean, he's not a Godzilla fan; he's just the guy who works there.
Okay.
And he didn't really care about the the politics of the film. Or he just really got into it as a film. He just really enjoyed it.
Okay.
The movie, despite my feelings towards the film, it did find an audience for right now. Right now, at least, whether or not it'll still be a thing 20 years from now, who can say? But for right now, it definitely found an audience, and that was definitely true of the reaction with U.S. fans. U.S. fans really got into this film. Mm-hmm. And going back to my original point, it was the subject of G-Fest 2017. Mm-hmm. G-Fest 2018, however, in the wake of Godzilla Planet of the Monsters, I don't recall a single panel about the film. I don't recall a single conversation between myself, Brayton, or Andrew, or even people that I ran into about the film. Mm-hmm. I don't recall talking about it with Steve Rifle. Here's a funny story for you. Okay. Steve Rifle only watched the first anime, Planet of the Monsters, and he gave up 30 minutes in. Smart man.
Oh, yeah. But hey, this means you have technically seen more Godzilla movies than your idol.
Yeah, technically, yes.
You know more about Godzilla movies than he does now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's about 3 films that I couldn't care less about. But back to my point. I don't recall a single conversation between myself or anybody about Godzilla Planet of the Monsters at G-Fest 2018. And like you said, I will be astonished if it's any kind of attention factor or topic of conversation or general discussion mode, whatever, at G-Fest this year. I will be shocked, frankly. Right. Because I think, especially since Godzilla King of the Monsters will precede G-Fest, right? I think that will be definitely the talking point this year. Whether the film is good or not, I think it'll be like what fans will have on their minds in general by this July.
Right, and yeah, it's very funny because I remember the year after Godzilla 2014 came out, there was already a panel discussing the movie itself. And I think there was also the case for Shin Godzilla where there were panels talking about that movie in particular. So it surprises me that there was no movie panel at all at last year's G-Fest dedicated to the anime trilogy. And I believe, we were on Greg Nunman's channel, live stream, talking about every panel that was going to happen at G-Fest, and I don't recall a single panel being about the anime trilogy.
Yeah, if there was, I don't remember it.
Right. And if there is, I'm not gonna attend it.
No, I won't be there either.
Yeah.
The whole thing it's just a big, strange misfire, and it's just it's just the big thing is that it's dull. It's just dull.
And it's like at the end of the day, whether or not it was made as a tax write-off or whatever, I could probably, with 80% certainty say it was simply made to fill the gap and to keep Godzilla somewhat in the public spotlight for another couple of years before King of the Monsters came in. So it's like, people would often excuse it just for it being essentially filler media, but here's the thing. Mm-hmm. Filler media doesn't do it for me.
Me either.
Yeah, I mean, should I? Maybe it's like people would blame us for having too high expectations for filler media, but then again, it shouldn't have been filler media to begin with.
Yeah, and here's the thing: when I go into a film, I go in just saying, okay, let's just see what it is and just see how I respond to it. Right. Those are my expectations when I go into a film. I don't go in with a checklist saying like, okay, the film's got to oblige me on this and this and that. My only expectations is that it interests me. And that it gets my attention, and that I walk out with some kind of positive impression. That's what I hope. That's what I hope to get out of every film, whether it's Godzilla or something else entirely. I just want to have a film that gives me some kind of experience that I will take away from in a positive light. I don't want to be bored or frustrated or have my time wasted or anything like that. So that's what I wanted of Shin Godzilla. That's what I wanted of the anime trilogy. Mm-hmm. That's what I will want of Godzilla King of the Monsters. But I'm not going to go in, with a preformed outlook or a preformed set of expectations. I'm just going to go see what it is. Uh-huh. And that's just to me that's just a plain sensible way of going to see films. Just waiting to see what it is, and just responding to it, without a large bias. That's just the way I approach films. I've always found it to be very rewarding. Heck, I think that's the reason why I was one of those few people who, when 2014 came out, said, hey, you know what? It was good, but it wasn't that good.
Meanwhile, everyone is like, this sucks because it didn't live up to my these massive expectations. And, so I feel like Shin Godzilla will definitely be remembered as the years go by, just for being this very weird, bizarre little film that was made between the Hollywood movies, as well as a interesting experimentation from Anno himself. Or it's going to be a very interesting mark in both Anno and Higuchi's careers. But for the anime trilogy, I honestly feel like these are going to be forgotten as time goes on, and these are just going to be little more than just a strange cliff note in the history of Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, oh hey, in 2017 and 2018 there was a series of movies that came out. Okay, next topic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like,
and for my money, it's the single most uninteresting stretch for Godzilla to date.
Which is very sad considering how ambitious its ideas were.
Yeah. I poke fun at the later 90s Godzilla films quite often, but, even the dullest of those at least had some rousing music and some, colorful special effects via Kawakita. But, okay, I'll say this much, part 1 of the anime has a cool finishing scene.
True, yeah, yeah.
Part 3 has a couple of a couple of good moments and a couple of
trippy
scenes,
visuals.
A couple of pretty visuals, a couple of scenes that seem to be building towards something, as opposed to just stopping immediately.
Right.
Not to a degree where it's satisfying, but at least there's like something of an effort there for a little while.
it definitely pulled a Ryan Johnson and subverted my expectations by having the protagonist ignore the lesson that the whole movie is about and killed himself.
Yeah, I guess I'll say that's true. I did not see that ending coming. I guess I'll give it that.
It's a movie that promotes what do you call it? It was like nihilism versus optimism, and it ends with the protagonist killing himself.
Even though he had a kid, he had a kid in the works, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And
wow,
he didn't bother. He did, as far as we know, in what's shown to us in the movie, he never bothered to talk to his baby mama. He talked to his her sister, before going to kill himself. With his comatose, brain dead ex-girlfriend.
Was she like his sister or cousin?
I really don't know, because again, this movie poorly explains everything, and people are like, "Oh, it's in the book or the manga." It's like, no, a movie should stand on its own. What we see is what we get. Yeah,
you should not have to rely on secondary promotional material to understand the basic plot points of a film.
Right? It's like, oh, the first movie is passable because it's only meant to be an introduction. Well, guess what? Star Wars: A New Hope was an introduction.
Yeah,
and Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, was an introduction.
Yeah, here's the thing. Even if Planet Eater had been exceptionally good, which it wasn't, even if it had been, that would still not have redeemed the poor writing and poor execution of parts 1 and 2.
Right. Although it's really funny, I will always say this. I remember when D-Man made a video theorizing that there might be 2 Godzillas in the legendary continuity, and when I saw the very ending of Godzilla Planet of the Monsters in theaters, I was like, "Holy shit, D-Man was right about the wrong movie." So, anyways, yeah, I'm never going to see these movies ever again, and I'm not going to even bother adding these to my collection. If or when they ever get a DVD, Blu-ray, 4K release.
Yeah, as far as I know, they're not available like on disc stateside.
Right, stateside. Yeah, I think the first movie and maybe the second movie were given a super limited DVD, Blu-ray release, because that's how Japan rolls, I guess. So yeah, and we end things with that. Even though technically the modern era of Godzilla continues to this day, sadly, the Heisei era came to an end on April 30th, 2019. And, of course, there were no movies really made. Of course, Planet Eater got a release, I believe, in January of this year. And only 1 month after the Reiwa era begins, do we get Godzilla, King of the Monsters from Legendary and Warner Brothers, with Michael Dougherty in place of Gareth Edwards. and pretty much got a whole new team behind Godzilla King of the Monsters. And from what I've seen so far, it looks like it's at the very least trying to improve upon the mistakes made in the 2014 Godzilla film. Especially with, it feels like after like Godzilla 2014, I feel like with 2014, Warner Brothers and Legendary were very hesitant and were very unsure if whether or not mainstream American audiences today would accept Godzilla in the modern age. And I guess after the majority of people cried out that they wanted more Godzilla in the next movie, they grew more confident. And so I feel like we got a massive improvement in that angle with Kong Skull Island. And hopefully that trend of improving films will continue forth into Godzilla King of the Monsters and later in next year with Godzilla vs. Kong. Although I am still very hesitant with Godzilla vs. Kong, considering that it's got Terry Rossio involved as the writer of this movie, and he wrote the 94 script, which I am not a fan of.
What? But it's the one that could have been, Andres.
I mean, it could have been, but but that doesn't guarantee it could have been great.
but it had the Godzilla who did not die from missiles and therefore was automatically good and better.
So, you know what? Godzilla also had you know what other movie had a Godzilla that survived missiles? The anime trilogy. He survived nukes to the face. Did that make the movie any better?
Oh man, you're bringing logic into this, man.
That's just crazy talk, man.
Yeah, for the record, I agree with you about the 94 script. It's not good.
I definitely got people commenting that they really like it. You know, more power to you.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel it's like a very generic, super generic 90s Hollywood movie that maybe it could have been better. Maybe you could have had a Will Smith or a Jeff Goldblum in there to spice things up, like Independence Day. But who knows, man? So it's like I'm very hesitant because of that. But in terms of King of the Monsters, I am definitely very hopeful of it. You know, I'm not expecting the greatest movie of all time this time around. I'm just expecting a decent, fun monster mash of a movie.
Mm.
Yeah. And with the World of Godzilla that Toho announced last year, I have no idea where that's going to go. Because again, Toho doesn't make their own movies. Shin Godzilla, was very shaky in the special effects department. So I don't know how they're going to approach that series of films, if they're still going to do that, considering how recently it was announced that Toho is interested in continuing their partnership after 2020.
Mm-hmm. I really do think that if the Kaiju cinematic universe, or whatever it's gonna be called,
the Monsterverse, you're talking about the Toho one, okay?
Yeah. Is that what it's called? Kaiju cinematic universe?
I think for now people are just sticking to the World of Godzilla.
Okay,
which sounds like a Disney attraction.
Yeah, looking at the dismal box office for the Millennium films. And the fact that Shin Godzilla found an audience for reasons that really had nothing to do with the monster itself.
Right. I
really do think that if this World of Godzilla thing is going to take off in its home domestic market, mm-hmm. they're gonna have to find a Shin Godzilla way of appealing to a Japanese audience in a way that goes beyond just monsters.
Here's what you do, okay? Hayao Miyazaki's Godzilla.
That would I'd actually be interested in seeing that, frankly.
Oh yeah, and you make it animated, you get Studio Ghibli behind it. Or rather, did you ever saw that Shinji Higuchi and Hideaki Anno Studio Ghibli collaboration called Giant God Warrior Appears in Tokyo?
Not seen it, but I've seen clips of it. Okay,
so yeah, it was an 8-minute short. It's a prequel to Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's pretty great, and you can definitely see a lot of Shin Godzilla influence there, but with a much bigger budget, because this is Ghibli after all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, get Ghibli on it, get Shinji Higuchi on it, get Hayao Miyazaki, he's another big name. Yeah.
Actually, I will say this, if Anno were to come back to make a Godzilla film, I'd say have him do an episodic anime kind of like Evangelion. with Godzilla.
Yeah,
because as far as my take on Anno is that I do think the guy has a lot. Again, I'm not a fan of Shin Godzilla. In fact, I'm not a fan of Anno's live action work in general.
I'm not a fan of him as a person either. He stinks. He needs to shave.
His hygiene is kind of interesting, isn't it? However, I do think the man's episodic anime, like the original Evangelion series and Gunbuster in particular, are quite enjoyable.
Oh yeah,
yep. I really like those shows. I really do think that his instincts, his creative talents, are best fit for that kind of medium. With animation and with that 25-minute episodic format. Mm-hmm. To me, like that, I find myself thinking about Evangelion, the show, more than End of Evangelion, the movie, any day of the week. I just think his sensibilities work better in that format. And if he wanted to do a kaiju, doesn't even have to be Godzilla, just a kaiju episodic anime, I would actually be quite curious to see how he would handle that.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say that. But again, as far as World of Godzilla appealing to a domestic market in Japan today, unless they find a way to appeal to it to an audience with non-kaiju, with a specific non-kaiju vibe, like Shin Godzilla did, mm-hmm. I just can't see it, doing particularly well in its home country, given the fact that Godzilla is not, as you yourself have stated many times, not particularly big in Japan to this day.
Here's the thing: you get Godzilla and Doraemon. you did Shin-chan. Now you got to go for the biggest Japanese cartoon character.
Maybe the film should feature that Godzilla store, since apparently that Godzilla store is a mark of how popular Godzilla is in Japan, right?
Funny enough about the Godzilla store, with the official artwork released, you see like Shin Godzilla in the middle of all these like Showa style monsters. I get the feeling that perhaps for the time being, Toho wants to use Shin Godzilla as like the new face of Godzilla. Do you think that might be the case or not?
I think it is the case because, after all, what statue they put in front of their studio.
Yeah, that's true. They put the oh no wait, it's they still have the Heisei Godzilla in front of their studio.
It's the other building, right?
Yeah, it's the Hibiya Toho Cinema building. So yeah, that's where it is. Yeah, so they didn't take. Funny enough, in one of the buildings next to that statue, there's a Godzilla 1991 statue inside it. Yeah.
But even still, the fact they put up that particular Godzilla in statue form on one of their properties.
And previously there was like a pseudo Godzilla 54-esque statue in that same spot. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Yeah, the fact that they did put a Shin Godzilla there is like, it looks like they're maybe using that as the new face of Godzilla, considering that he's the most popular native Godzilla in a long ass time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Definitely going to be very interesting in terms of branding, because that is quite an interesting design they went with.
It is indeed, and it could have been even weirder had they gone with their original idea.
Yeah. It's like, for anyone who hasn't seen the art book or the concept art for Shin Godzilla, it's like, if you think Shin Godzilla is weird, he looks normal compared to like the gross monstrosity that Anno wanted with, up until like, what was it? Toho came in and said like, cut this weird shit out, idiots. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because from the beginning, the Higuchi and Anno wanted Godzilla to evolve over the course of the film.
Yeah. But
their original plan was to have Godzilla start off looking like Godzilla and then change into something totally weird and bizarre and strange that was totally unrecognizable.
Uh-huh.
And Toho just wouldn't go along with that, so they decided to do the reverse. Have Godzilla start off unrecognizable and then slowly change into, the more recognizable Godzilla aesthetic.
Right.
But yeah, it could have been a lot weirder.
Ooh, so speaking of Godzilla designs, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I guess I got distracted. Earlier in the last episode, we talked about who was the main designer behind Godzilla 2000. And you found out earlier today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to answer the question that we left hanging from the last episode, it's kind of a two-part answer. The original general aesthetic for that design came from the silhouette that Shinji Nishikawa drew, which is what you see on like some of the posters for Godzilla 2000.
Right.
However, the finalized design was actually designed by suit maker Shinichi Wakasa, who created the design with input from himself, from director Takao Okawara, special effects director Kenji Suzuki, and producer Shogo Tomiyama. So it's kind of like the brainchild of a lot of people. It was inspired by Nishikawa's silhouette design, but it became what it is through Wakasa and the input of several other people.
Okay then. So I guess to wrap things up with the Showa content, with the Showa era of Godzilla films, you definitely had a wide variety of Godzilla movies.
You mean the Heisei?
Oh no, I'm just talking about Showa.
Oh, okay.
You had a wide variety of different Godzillas, despite all taking place in one single series. You had like dark movies like the 54 film, lighthearted movies like Godzilla Revenge and Godzilla vs. Megalon. You got some in between, like it took itself seriously while still being fun and imaginative, like Godzilla vs. Mothra and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. And I feel like for the Heisei era, you had like an equally diverse amount of different Godzilla movies throughout the 30-year span, don't you think?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so I feel like when it comes to Godzilla movies, the full Heisei era of Godzilla movies offer something for everyone. Whether you want something that's more action-packed, something more sci-fi driven or fantasy driven, or you want something very experimental, something more traditional. There's something there for everyone, and clearly these movies have found an audience to varying degrees. And it kind of goes to show that Godzilla is easily a character that can transcend numerous generations and can adapt to the times. Maybe not so for the Japanese market, as the Millennium era has shown us, but internationally, these movies still appeal to a much wider audience. And thankfully, with the start of the resurgence of Hollywood's Godzilla that's currently going on today, it's kind of like helped strengthen the fact that people still love Godzilla to this very day. People like you, like me, like our friends and family. It just goes to show that this may be a very bizarre character of this, mutated, fucked up dinosaur, radioactive, fire-breathing dinosaur. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's still a character that still manages to appeal to all of us for various reasons, for multiple reasons. And I am very confident that as we progress through the Reiwa era, we're in for quite an interesting time to be a Godzilla fan, as his popularity continues and both Hollywood and Japan continues to capitalize on his success.
I am quite curious to see how the MonsterVerse is going to fare, in the long run, with mainstream audiences here in the United States. Speaking for myself, I don't know anybody in my personal life who owns copies of Godzilla 2014 or Kong Skull Island. I mean, everybody I know went to go see those films when they were in theaters because they were big summer movies, but I don't know anybody who's not a kaiju fan who owns copies of those films or saw them more than once. So I am curious to see if Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong will have any kind of longevity with mainstream audiences stateside in the long run. I'm sure they'll make money when they're brand new. Of course they will. They're summer movies, but will they still be remembered by anybody 20 years from now? Who can say? But I'm quite curious to see where that leads to.
Yeah, it is possible that perhaps it is the niche fan base that could potentially keep it still alive through the fan support. But whether or not but you are right, the fact that these are big Hollywood productions, it does bring into question whether or not that niche fan base is big enough to support these movies alone in the aftermarket. And whether the niche market's going to grow at all with these films. Right. I kind of get the feeling that Godzilla's like more people are more aware of Godzilla being a thing. But yeah, for the time being, I still feel like it's still a very niche product, a franchise, in comparison to, say, Marvel or Game of Thrones or Batman or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you do raise.
Yeah, I would say aware are the two key words, not like growing in terms of popularity so far. Yeah, we'll see where the next two MonsterVerse films go as far as that's concerned.
Definitely. At the very least, I'm very glad that the MonsterVerse is taking a very short-sighted approach to this, where it's like, let's focus on the movies that we're making now instead of doing what Marvel or DC try to do and try to cram so many things or try to plan like 5 years ahead. Or try to do what the Dark Universe did, and they stumbled right out of the gate right before announcing a whole slew of films. So, at the end of the day, man, where can people find you?
Well, I am most active as a writer on Toho Kingdom and Sci-Fi Wire. I write about a wide variety of things, and not including but not limited to things like Godzilla. I do everything from film reviews to articles about broader topics to original interviews with film historians and sometimes actors who have worked in not only Godzilla but also just cinema in general. And I upload content to both those sites semi regularly. So please check out my stuff there. I hope you'll find it interesting. I try very hard to bring a new perspective, or try to bring a good, well-written perspective on my subjects that I write about. And that's where I am most shall we say prevalent as far as content is concerned.
And for people who are going to be attending G-Fest, I believe that they can also attend one of the panels that you'll be hosting. Am I correct?
Yes. On Sunday at 2 p.m., I will be participating in a panel on the great composer Akira Ifukube. I will be joined by my good friend Eric Hominick, the webmaster of AkiraIfukube.org, conductor John DeSantis, who will be co-conducting the concert this year, Kaiju Crescendo, our very, very smart and knowledgeable guy, Tyler Martin, and Reiko Yamada, who was a former student of Akira Ifukube. Again, that's a Sunday at 2 p.m. at G-Fest.
Excellent. And as for me, you can continue to follow me here on the Kaiju Noir channel, where you can check out more reviews and podcasts of various different topics, mainly related to giant monsters, giant robots, and everything, maybe a couple of noir-themed reviews here and there, superheroes as well. You can also be sure to follow me if you want to follow more of my creative ventures, you can follow the Kaiju versus Cancer Facebook page, where me and Matt, charity program that Matt Denny and I have started a year ago, and we've been putting out having charity events involving selling comics or books or anthology books or t-shirts. Currently, we are still selling that anthology book that we had a lot of participants in. And other than that, I also am still currently in the process of finishing up my comic book, Primal Warrior Draco Azul. And I can gladly announce that for the cover art, it will be done by none other than IDW Godzilla artist himself, Jeff Zornow. So once that he finishes the cover art, I'll gladly share it on the Facebook page. And I will be at G-Fest this year, where I will be in the Artist Alley selling my comic, hopefully, if we get it printed in time, at Denny Roth's table. And also I'll be part of a panel of my own, which will be the Godzilla YouTubers panel, where I'll be there alongside Matt from Monstrosities Tokusatsu Vlogs, Titan Goji, and D-Man 1954, and a couple other individuals there. So we're all going to be there talking about what it's like being a Godzilla YouTuber, talking about like our favorite things, the challenges we come across day by day, and answer any questions from the audience. So yeah, You can check out all of our stuff online, and you can have the chance to meet us in person at this year's G-Fest in Chicago on July 12th through the 14th, I believe. Taking a quick look, yes, July 12th through the 14th in Chicago at the Chicago O'Hare Hotel, and there you will, be free to approach us. If you ask us anything you want, we're free to, hang out with any. We're more than glad to hang out with any of our fans. So until next time, my friends. I'd like to give a big thanks to my friend Patrick for being here for this massive 6-hour journey throughout the last 30 years of Godzilla history. Thank you so much, man, for your for the vital information. You've brought a lot of informative content to this podcast of ours, and like to once again, man, I cannot state how grateful I am for you to be a part of this.
And thank you very much for having me. It was a lot of fun. It was an honor to be here.
I'm very happy to hear that. So for the final time for this retrospective, I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
I have been Patrick Galvan, aka Patrick Galvan.
And until next time, everybody, take care.